How to manage a bad draft slot or some bad draft slot luck and turn it into a jackpot of $300,000. That's what myself and Conor O'Driscoll are looking to do today on this edition of the RotoViz Best Ball Show. We did a draft earlier today where we drafted from a slightly more favorable slot at the 105, and I think built an absolutely tremendous team. You may have already heard that draft and not read about the team, but seen the team, thought about the team. But we have released this one a couple of days later because we're recording this one basically 3 hours or so after the original draft. We're drafting here from the 111. Of course, you can check out all of Conor's work on RotoViz. You can also find all his thoughts, I guess we'll say, on Twitter at DricoOut. You can find me over on Twitter as well at Overtime Ireland. But I'm looking forward to seeing what we do here and use some different tactics maybe to build out an interesting roster. But Conor, the turn picks are more challenging, I have to admit. But you know, the fallen values and so on, you don't get as many of them at the turns, and maybe you have to reach a little bit for some players to make sure you get them in your roster. But I think we'll make this work. We'll turn this team into a juggernaut. How are you feeling about the draft slot? Does that take the wind out of your sails a little bit? And what do you want to do here at the 111?
So I actually I disagree. That's a bad draft slot.
Oh yeah,
it is in most formats. But
if you get Garrett Wilson to go one more spot, it definitely isn't a bad draft slot. But is that going to happen?
Oh no, we didn't get it. Do like Puka Nakua here. Not sure how you feel about that.
I don't mind it. It's just there's a big gap for me between Nakua and Wilson. There's a huge
It wasn't
cleft
very
at that
nice
point for me.
to get Puka there.
So we are on the clock.
Yeah.
If you want to go with Nakua, you can. I wouldn't be against here getting two hammers at tight end if you want to do that. I don't know if you want to put as much stock into the tight end position.
I like getting one of the second round guys, but I don't like taking both of them.
Okay. So we do have 22 seconds, and I'm good with going Nakua if you want it. I'm good going that way if you want to. So we take Nakua. I do find there's just a... you mentioned this on the previous draft that we did, but there's that part of the hope of maybe a player gets to you. Myself and Sean drafted in the FFPC main event last week, and when that draft was ongoing, Garrett Wilson was one spot away also and went. And there is that kind of a dagger when it's just one spot there and you get Garrett Wilson and then you get, let's say, Trey McBride. Sam Laporta does get the 112. So if the drafter at the turn, yeah, we got nailed. We got crushed here, Conor.
We got absolutely crushed.
Yeah.
Absolutely crushed.
I think that we have to skip on tight end, in my opinion, and see what comes back to us in the following round once you miss out on the two of them at the turn. I think we probably lean into either Drake London, Chris Olave, or Jahmyr Gibbs. They're probably where I'm looking here.
Okay, why don't we do Gibbs?
Okay, let's do a little bit of a different build here than at the 111. My worst case scenario there when we were passing on the two tight ends is there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee in this format at the turn, and I like what that drafter at the 12 did. The reason that I mentioned about possibly taking both of them is you kind of have to do something different to catch up a little bit with the wide receiver firepower that has gone ahead of you. So the team that drafted ahead of us took Garrett Wilson. Now they take Drake London. I think that while I like the Nakua pick, I think you're kind of going to be chasing then with what comes back to you in the third to catch up with that. So having those two tight ends, I think, makes it interesting. And if it was a solo draft, I probably would have taken Trey McBride at the 111. Me and Sean did take him. He was the consolation pick that we... consolation's harsh. The pick we took after missing out on Wilson and the main event. So I probably would have went with him there. But again, the likelihood of the drafter at the 1-2 turn takes both of those is quite slim. So the play that we made with the hope of one of them coming back, I think is a fair play. We just got crushed here with how the drafter intended.
Yeah, I've done a lot of these, obviously, and Sam Laporta makes it through that turn 95% of the time. not maybe that's a little high, but a very high percentage. Trey McBride, he normally goes in the mid to late seconds.
Yeah.
So very disappointed there. Um, so I do want to note for some people it would be a controversial decision to pass up on Travis Kelce uh, at tight end there after those first two guys go. But I knew uh, I thought I had slim chance of persuading you on that. Um, are you just not drafting Travis Kelce at all this year? And I didn't bring him up, so I know that's a little bit of. Uh, I didn't want him either.
Well, I said the phrase that I was going to pass at that point. I think while I have no problem with drafting Travis Kelce, it's not the part of the Chiefs offense that I'm attacking. And I'm looking at players again who, year on year, where are these players in drafts in 2025? And I think that Kelce could hold in a late second round ADP. But I think if we look at the trajectory of Laporta, McBride, and Kincaid, they're moving up the way, and their seasons are likely to be, on the increase. Whereas I feel like we did see it. I know we had Kelce down the stretch last season, did have some really big games, and especially then when we head towards the playoff time. But I think in the regular season, like at a point, it did look like it was just like this was the end for Travis Kelce. So we are seeing, him probably wane a little bit. And then when you have the receivers that have been added, there is a chance that, he starts to get less involved, not less important, but less involved overall in the Chiefs offense moving forward. So I'm just looking at it more on a career trajectory perspective. And then based on the prices and the players that go around where he goes. So I'm willing to take McBride and Laporta. But then even Kincaid in this draft went at the 209. Like that's kind of where I would be willing to make the move on him. I don't really want to be pulling him up into the pick at the start of the second round. So I'm much more likely to draft like a Mark Andrews. He goes here at the 302 in the early third than I am to draft Kelce in the early second. It's kind of just more of the opportunity cost.
The injuries that Kelce suffered last year, and with that the lower root participation, that has you looking firmly as Kelce at the very end of his career.
Well, I just feel like that is the direction that we're going here. Like it is a case that as players get older, they get closer to the end of their career. Yeah. He's 34 and he's going to be 35 now in October. So it is possible that he continues his career till like 37, 38. But, history has told us that generally isn't the case. So that's more the impact than just that he had some knocks or some injuries last season. The players, like if I'm looking, like we took Gibbs there and I feel like we're getting a discount on him based on some of the injury stuff. He was another player myself and Sean drafted in the main event. But Drake London, and I mentioned Chris Olave, who I think is a steal in this format when he goes at the 304. But they're probably the two targets I have at that particular point. Like the likes of Pacheco, Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, who all go after in that range, I'm bypassing them too. And it's not because I think they're like terrible footballers. It's just that they're not targets that I think are going on the upslope of their career, I guess. And with the Travis Kelce one, it's kind of like I would rather be a year too early on the fall off than be a year too late, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I have very little of Travis Kelce this year too.
There's one. There's two.
It's a controversial. It's a controversial take to be heavy.
I think it's controversial. I would say in the grand scheme of fantasy football. I think in terms of a lot of the RotoViz content, it's probably not as controversial.
No. It's completely in keeping with RotoViz style.
And I'm also kind of surprised that like the Sam Laporta, Trey McBride ADP has got to the point where it's Sam Laporta is ahead. Then we have McBride one pick later generally by ADP. Like that they have pushed up. It shows the way the community is on the position. We did get this draft is going to be a challenge because we did get Jalen Waddle, who was top of our queue, going that one pick ahead of us again. We are back on the clock. I would go here with Devontae Smith. I was hoping to get both of those guys, but I think what's going to happen here is we get Smith and then we probably get Kettle on the way back. Is that the way you're kind of thinking here?
I think that's what we. I think that's how we have to play it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um. So
And when you say
we're kind of
have,
punishing. We're punishing 12 a little bit because now he's been he's gonna take Ayuk, would assume, but now he's been kind of like kept out of that tier of receivers by double tapping tight end there. And you're right when I say the way we have to do it. Devonta Smith is with Ayuk, that's sort of last in the tier there, and then Ayuk has the risk where he's on full holdout. So, you definitely prefer Devonta Smith there, and then with the Kittle piece, we will obviously if and when we take Kittle here, we'll be reaching a little bit by ADP, and especially when he's gone much. Wow, they just bypassed. So we really punished that 12 drafter. And now we have a choice of, do we want George Kittle or do we want Brandon Ayuk, who I think still belongs in that next tier, but has just a little bit more risk. I think I'm just Kittle here.
I'm more on Kittle out of the two in general. I'm open to it if you want to go Ayuk. The other wide receiver that's here is Metcalf. But what I'm hoping at this point is we take Kittle here. It guarantees us obviously our tight end for the elite tight end. When we're getting back in that next round, there's a chance that we get Brock Bowers back to us, but he goes one pick ahead of our ADP over the last couple of days. David Njoku goes right at her ADP, or in that kind of range. Sorry, I had that back to front. In the 6th round I'm talking about here. But we're going now into the 4th round. So we're going to go over and back. Jake Ferguson usually goes in that range, and that's where George Kittle also goes. And then, like, ideally we come away with a second tight end. But what you're hoping that would
we feel much better about tight end if we combine George Kittle with Brock Bowers. That's much better.
Yeah, and that's where it's going to get quite interesting then to, after the 1-2 turn, I was thinking like I would rather have the double tight end team there. But if we can sneak it back around and get Brock Bowers, that may be a case where then we have Nakua and Devontae Smith and they have DJ Moore and Rashee Rice. And, which way does those 2v2s play out? So I think it's going to be very intriguing. Brandon Ayuk does go off the board in the mid-4th, the drafter who is Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Travis Kelce, and Nico Collins. And I think that we're just going to have to be really on our toes here at these turns, and we may have to take some players like that a little bit of a reach to make sure we can put the right combination together for the draft structure. One advantage we do have at the minute is we did take Gibbs, so we're kind of locked in with that kind of hero RB start. And it gives us a little bit of a leverage if we do, there's some of those picks. We talked about this on the previous draft where it's hard to make that decision to go for a Kenneth Walker, for example. But when you do get down to the level where it is, Chase Brown, it might be a case at one of those turns that we have to grab another wide receiver before that wide receiver cliff. But because we have Gibbs, it's going to give us that flexibility. So I think this next turn, though, is going to give us a lot of direction as to what we are going to do in this draft in terms of the overall board. If we get a situation where 2 wide receivers at that next tier, like a Worthy and a Higgins, that really changes the reflection of the room. But then we have that decision with Bowers as well. But Connor, you were mentioning to me off air some, interesting news. Do you want to spring it here on the listeners?
Yeah. So as I shared recently on Ship Chasing, my wife and I we're expecting a baby. We're now 12 weeks along, and we've had the gender reveal. We're having a girl.
Pretty awesome. I have a girl who's 6 years old, so congratulations and welcome to the Girl Dad Club, I guess. Funny enough, here's two sides of a coin. My wife is now 36 weeks along, and we have not found out the gender. So we didn't find out the gender with our first girl. We didn't find out this time either. So we're sitting here kind of 3 or 4 weeks out from the, birth, and it's a whole guessing game as to which names it is, which clothes you have to get. So we're sitting here.
Is that how you did it the first time as well?
The exact same way, yeah. So we had thought about doing it this time and finding out, but we just decided that we'd leave it again. So yeah. You're well ahead of my preparation at this point.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to talk about on the stream why you guys chose to? I'm curious why you chose not to find out early.
Just we didn't the first time, and we thought then this time we would let it roll. We were very close the day that like we went in and they were asking, "Do you want to find out?" We were very close that day, and then we just kind of decided at the time, "No, we'll leave it." It was more of it might even be a superstition thing. We
Right.
everything went well the first time, and we'll try it. And
Right.
uh, it was
I mean,
pretty,
happy, both happy either way.
yeah, one of those things. So I don't know. I have no preference. I just want a healthy baby, and then we'll see where we go from there. The one thing I've joked about it would be easier financially because we have all the
Right. You've
clothes and
all
all
the clothes.
for a 6-year-old. Well, like stored away and saved that, but for a girl, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, only a couple of weeks left for that. So mine's is at the start of football season. Sounds like yours is going to be coming up to Super Bowl time, I would assume. But wishing
So
you
we
all the
will
best
be
with that.
March 4th. So just a
March
little bit
4th.
after the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So
Which is perfect timing.
yeah, so hopefully everything goes awesome along the way with that, and people I'm sure will get updates in the very near future as to how my time is going. Week one is kind of a couple of days after week one. Will be live for that one. We are now going back to looking at where some of the players may come to us. This has been a little bit more wide receiver heavy than maybe I had hoped. When we look at some of the wide receivers that we're down to now, we have the likes of Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Stephon Diggs, who I know you really like, off the board at this particular point in time. But I mentioned T. Higgins. He usually goes around Tank Dell. He hasn't gone off the board yet. We got nipped on all the picks so far. I'm not feeling optimistic. I was telling you in the last draft, be optimistic about it. Not feeling as optimistic here, Connor, when you have to wait to the turn for these players to make it to you. The players that I would like that are kind of in this range, as I mentioned, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Brock Bowers. They are the
Yeah.
names. Is there any other names here that you're looking at? And the other thing I was going to mention is 4 quarterbacks have gone off the board in the last kind of 6 or so picks. 2 of those being Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson go into the draft already, the 2 spot. So it'll be interesting to watch how they balance that roster out and when they realize that it isn't super flex. But T. Higgins does go off the board to the 7 drafter, so we don't have him. We're going to have to make some decisions or reaches. What's your thoughts, other than we need to get Xavier Worthy and Brock Bowers?
So we knew. Well, I should say we have 2 players that we're targeting here. I don't think we get them back from the turn. So as long as 9 or 10 doesn't take the exact guys we want, then we should be okay.
And it's going to be ahead of ADP, but I'm wondering if it does get to a case where Worthy and Bowers get to us, should we take Worthy in the hope that the drafter at the turn doesn't take a third tight end at this point?
Oh no, don't do that. If they've already shown a willingness to do tight end like that, um, don't. To me, that's like playing with fire. People are not afraid to triple tap tight end anymore. I'm not afraid to triple. We have a draft ourselves where we went. I think it was either I think it was McBride, Kittle, Bowers, and we were
Yeah,
very happy with that. So
yeah.
don't. I think we just take Bowers, and then this guy might take Bowers. That's probably what that they're probably thinking. Uh, can they take Bowers? Can they take Tank over Bowers? Because they know they're not getting the other one back. Is my guess.
We wait with bated breath as the clock ticks down. 20 seconds left on that
But
pick.
I
These are the
like I like your wordy call. Like that it'll be early by ADP to take wordy at 6:02. Oh wow! So
took and joke.
we just smash Brock Bowers here.
Okay, I think that I do think I'm a little
Wait,
bit concerned. Worthy is down by looking at it. There's a lot of wide receivers ahead of him here, so let's risk it. Then you got us to risk it in round one, and it was a disaster. Let's
who do you
risk it
want?
here, and
Oh,
let's.
oh, I think we take Bowers here. I think there's a pretty strong chance that Wordy makes it back.
Okay, let's go for it. He gets it wrong in round one. Does he get it right in round 5? The predictions here. We do have Pickens, McLaurin, Kirk, Godwin, Ridley, all by ADP here ahead of Worthy. So I think if we can get him, we get McLaurin off the board, let's hope the next pick isn't Worthy, and then we talk. It's Joe Mixon. Let's just take Worthy, and we won't waste any more time on this conversation. I think that changes the outlook of the team dramatically to get both of those. And the Worthy pick you mentioned, like ahead of ADP, it is only kind of 4 picks ahead of ADP at that point. The Bowers pick was around 4 picks as well, but we had to get those 2 names on to, I think,
Yeah, you're
drastically
right.
change
You're
it.
right. I guess I'm anchored to his old price.
Yeah,
But paying a 602 for Wordy is like it's a great price in a vacuum. And now that you know that drafters are taking him there or thereabouts, it's certainly not a reach.
yeah. Usually, it looks like over the last couple of days, the 606 range for Worthy, it's obviously come up a lot. Rasheed Rice's ADP obviously coming up quite a bit as well. That been factored into a couple of reasons: the suspension looking less likely, and the injury to Hollywood Brown. So that does give us, that's the one thing about these turn picks too. When you're doing a podcast, there's a lot of room to fill in
Right,
between the conversation. But when we look now, it's going to be, if we get lucky, we'll get JSN back in the 7th round. Then it's
right.
Odunze, who we drafted in our previous draft. It's Christian Watson. Like you're really, if you don't get some of those names, or a Jaden Reed or a Keenan Allen, to fall past their ADP, I think you're in a situation here where you are in a pretty flat zone where you might be starting to look even at, heading into the running back position. But we have Gibbs. What are you kind of looking at here and hoping that might work out for us
So,
around this way?
one player who I don't have a lot of, I have a little bit. I have a little bit of Brian Thomas, but I don't have that much. And so, to me, I think if we get just locked out of that tier, then I think Brian Thomas becomes interesting as kind of like a somebody who it sounds like he is going to start full time wide
Sounds
receiver.
like it. Yeah.
He's been impressing with training camp. He had the high draft capital, had like um, had the college production, all that kind of stuff. Where maybe he's not quite as exciting as a player like Wordy, but it's still a profile that you want to bet on. And I think that's the direction my head would be in.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, when see we have Gibbs, and if you look at the wide receiver cliff, and maybe depending on who you are and when you're drafting, like I kind of have it around that Jameson Williams range. Jordan Addison goes shortly after that. So that 9-10 range where, when we're picking the next time around, we're going to be picking in that 7-8 turn. So you're not far away from the cliff. And if it's a case that you're in a draft where it's wide receiver heavy, the cliff can come that little bit sooner. But having the running back in a Gibbs already, are you more likely to make sure now that you get those receivers before the cliff, now that you've taken the running back? And at
Yeah,
this
yeah.
point
I
we
think I
have,
think I think that's my thought
yeah,
for sure because we've we have gone double elite tight end
yeah,
ish. So we have to factor in that extra tight end in our flex spot. But we only have 3 wide receivers. We did get, like you said, we went running back early, and then yeah, that does become more of a priority to get those kind of exciting wide receivers. And
yeah.
and just the ADP, and maybe we're just reading off of it sounds like we are reading off different ADP sources. I'm looking at Brian Thomas ADP of 96, which is right on the end of the 8th round. So it would be around the head of ADP, but I think like that's kind of like a situation that you have to contemplate. If you get locked out at the of the targets that you want at the ADP that you want, and being at the turn does mean that you have to consider those sorts of reaches, and I think those are okay in that situation where you have a structural imperative, and then you also have this young player who could just completely um, destroy that cost, where you're not too worried about that, like whatever it is, 12 picks of value.
I also love, we are probably like, the when you, for people using the RotoViz tools, when you go in and you put in the filter by date, depending on the date. Me and Connor talked about this after our last draft, that I had a wider range in terms of the dates. I think I have like one pick different than you. I have him at the 901, but
Okay.
it's not too
Okay.
far off. But I think that the main topic I wanted to bring up there for the listeners is when you have gone with that running back in the round one, and we talk about having 5 wide receivers through 7. We can't do that in this draft. The most we can have, obviously, with that running back and the 2 tight ends, is going to be 4 wide receivers through 7. So it can make it a case that you might want to bypass those early 0 RB targets. You might even be skipping that entire Javonte Williams, Chase Brown, Jalen Warren, tier all the way down to Tyjae Spears, for example. So you have to just be aware of that. That's, again, that thing of drafting from back to front and seeing which players you may need to make that bypass for to get down there to a Brian Thomas. Now, hopefully we don't have to do that and the draft works out in our favor, but that there is something to just have in consideration. One of the drafters who had a nice bit of draft luck there was the CJ Stroud drafter. It's only a couple of picks after ADP, but he was also a Tank Dell drafter who gets himself CJ Stroud a couple of picks after ADP, which is always a little bit of fun. Myself and Sean in that FFPC main event got him a good few picks after ADP, which led us to a 1 QB roster at the end of that particular draft. So we are now about a round away. So the wait is kind of on to see if we can sneak through some of the names. I've added some names to the queue. I want to know if you're out completely on any of them. Obviously, this is dependent on who makes it to us and ADP
Yeah,
equivalent.
I think we're in agreement on our targets here, and this isn't live, so we can actually just say this. So Deontay, I'm not drafting a lot of Deontay, but I think he would be a great pick at our draft slot. We did take JSN earlier. Definitely somebody I want to think more of. Christian Watson is interesting. Odunze. So we're kind of bummed to see JSN go. I wonder if that's a true auto, or they have a queue set up, I think.
I would imagine so, based on the players. They took Keenan Allen by auto draft and JSN by auto draft, so I'd imagine that's by a queue.
And then interested in your thoughts are on somebody like Aaron Jones falling back to us at 7-11, where that would be a big falling value, and probably a pretty unique pairing there for us. Big roster differentiator. Oh well, he just went.
It would be interesting. You have to take some of these names into consideration. If they that would have been a 12 pick drop if Jones did make it through. Dunze went as well. We could get completely crushed again here at this situation. Watson's really the wide receiver I'd be targeting now at this point. If he goes and those other 2 names potentially go, maybe we do need to consider how we build out this roster. So we mentioned about reaching down, but they're the names I'm kind of willing to go for. Jaden Reed is now gone, who was in that conversation, but yeah, we could be in a little bit of trouble here at this turn. And that is a point where you kind of have to factor in all your options as to what direction. Like, I wouldn't be against some of the running backs in this range if it really gets to a point where they're just clearly the better player. Not something I would tend to do, but we are getting set up here in a way that maybe we have to take it in a slightly different direction. I'm not really interested in any of the quarterbacks at this point. The other wide receiver that I would potentially discuss would be a Cortland Sutton. I don't know if you have any interest in him. And then I have to just mention, we could always just take our fallback option of TJ Hawkinson if we want to go that way, get our 3rd tight end. But I say that in jest. I think Connor will not want to do that. I kind of forced TJ Hawkinson on him a few times, so he's going to want to avoid that. But I'm wondering as well about the potential to just nail 2 of those RB targets as well. But that makes it very challenging throughout the rest of the draft. But you could potentially make that work. Essentially a hyper fragile build with running backs at this point.
Okay, so Goddard going there helps us. And then we're just waiting to see what the 10 drafter does. So interesting that he took a lot of our targets, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, right in front of us. Then he went Derrick Henry, Njoku, Anthony Richardson. So clearly somebody who's more of an FFPC drafter, where they happy to start heavy receiver, but then really feeling that urgency to build out the rest of their starting lineup. Okay. Okay. So I think I'm Brian Thomas here, where I know. So his ADP is 96.7 in the last 2 days. So we're drafting him early, um, but he is
I
he
think
is
if we want to go
he's
wide
ranked
receiver,
at.
he's the only option if we want to go wide receiver.
Yeah, I think he's just a pick here
Okay,
because
let's do it. Let's be aggressive. Let's do that, and then we'll see if Jameson comes back through. Um, and again, as I
so
mentioned,
I know
Javante
you
would be like. There's a couple of other options there I'd be interested in too, but I would
so
rather get the wide receiver.
right. So we do have Ramondre, we do have Javante Williams here. Um,
The key at this point when you miss out on your names, a couple of times there, is to not make two positions of weakness. So like,
right,
if we can be aggressive and get the wide receiver, but we also have to be aware that if then we're giving up two wide receivers and bypassing those running backs for running backs that may outscore those wide
right.
receivers,
We
like
don't
when we're
want to
trying to win
reach
the
all the way
flex.
through a tier.
Yeah.
I
And
think I do
that,
think with Brian Thomas, you can make the argument that he's in the same tier as Christian Watson. He's in the same tier
I think you
as
can.
and so that's why I'm willing to make that compromise now. But
I don't know
um,
if you can make the same call for Jameson,
I don't think so.
just for the competition for targets and so on.
He does.
Oh God,
Okay.
we're getting
So
this is a tough one.
any interest in Ramondre?
That would be the next way I would go. We're getting a discount on Ramondre, unless you
We are
want to
getting a
make.
big discount on Ramondre. We could do Raheem Mostert is the other option,
I'm in a
but
draft at the moment, a slow draft where Mostert has fallen 20 picks past ADP, so you might get back to this. He's only 4 picks down. I think I think Ramondre, we have to take what we get. That there's a
okay,
14 pick discount. We have to kind of take what's given to us.
yeah,
Um, so let's
that
take it.
that works for me. So we're kind of like we're balancing out our reach on Brian Thomas with
A little bit, but we're
Ramondre's decent
also, yeah,
value.
we're also in taking Thomas. I think like you can be aggressive and take one of those guys. I think it might be a bit much to push and try and get
Yeah,
both of those. And there is still, again, the problem now, it has been a kind of a wide receiver heavy room. So if we look by just, switch it to ADP or wide receiver on the FFPC site, it's Hollywood Brown, Land McConkey, Keon Coleman, Jameson Williams, Cortland Sutton. I'm really like at this point looking to see if we get Jordan Addison back through. And I did
right,
mention Sutton. You mentioned not at that pick. I think in this roster he could become interesting if it comes back. So I'm kind of thinking again the next round is probably going to be a split. One wide receiver, one running back pick again is probably what we end up doing. But this room has been a real challenge, I have to say, and picking at the turn like if you go
right,
back and look at how the board, if you're in a 5 or 6 here, you're kind of able to manipulate your way through the room and take the
right.
player while
You're
you get
getting
back.
the falling values,
Yeah, but
whereas we've
you're
just been
also
locked out of those.
you're also though getting a shot at those names that are just getting nowhere near us. Like you imagine, like we missed out on Waddle, like obviously easy pick, 4 picks earlier. Like
Right,
you're just getting that little bit of a nip, even versus the drafter at 11 or 10 and the choices that they've got to make. But that's where the draft slot kind of comes in, and who knows as we manage our way through the rest of this draft, it could be a case that some things fall to us in a more fortunate way. But it has been a challenge. But sometimes when you make it through those challenging drafts, they're the teams that you can be most favorable about. But it does feel like you're always kind of fighting uphill as that draft is progressing, which it kind of feels like we're doing now to kind of get the most out of this room. But I think we're still in a pretty decent position, but we have to keep that fight going.
right. Yeah. So I think getting Ramondre a couple of picks before we get Tony Pollard, we get Austin Eckler, we get Zamir White, those feel pretty good there.
That feels good, yeah. That pick.
Um, And another thing to keep in mind about our only four receivers here. So we do have that additional tight end, and so we almost in the way we've built here, we almost do have to think of Bowers like another receiver we've gotten. So our receiving core obviously not nearly as strong, or we perceive not nearly as strong as the draft that we did earlier. But all of these players do have pretty strong upside. Like Nakua had basically one of the best rookie wide receivers, if not the best rookie wide receiver seasons of all time. And so, like, you talk about a second year jump, you have that going for you. Uh, Gibbs, electrifying player, could easily just crush his backfield mate in David Montgomery, and put in like just a true smash season. Devonta Smith, we've all seen what he can do. Like you get a George Kittle season, like you could get a Brock Bowers smash season. Xavier Worthy, he showed what he can do with the ease he gets behind defenses. Brian Thomas, same thing. So like there's plenty of upside on our roster. We
Yeah.
don't feel as comfortable with it, but we certainly can build a very strong team here.
Yeah, it's like I said we missed out on Watson, but like Watson versus Brian Thomas at the end of the season, like you can have the positive case that like deep threats catching deep touchdowns and having massive outlying seasons, but the likelihood is that they're probably in a similar ballpark if both of them stay healthy all season long. I don't think there's that much of a jump. And you mentioned about him being possibly in that same tier, and I thought that was a very fair
Right.
discussion point that you mentioned there. Ramondre Stevenson again should be the absolute bell cow for the Patriots. If that offense can take any sort of a step forward and he can get in the end zone a little bit more, the picture changes. Like I think that the positives for all these players are very, very high. I guess what I'd be saying is some of them are like at the end of a tier or the start of a
Right.
second tier versus
Right.
like that's where I have the Nakua pick, and that's why like if Garrett Wilson had gone at 108 in this, and then it was AJ Brown before Nakua. Like I have them closer, and it wouldn't feel like as much of a gap. So I think all that you've said is positive towards the roster in general. Lots of upside throughout it, and we'll see how the rest of it now manages through. So we're heading into round 9. We do see Pat Fire, McDalton Schultz go off at the 8-9 turn to the drafter in the 1 slot. Jalen Warren, Chase Brown as 2 running backs to pair along with Kyron Williams for the drafter out of 2. Tajay
And
Spears,
then
then Brian Robinson.
this is a big slide for Joe Burrow. So be curious to see if the 6th slot, who does not have a quarterback yet,
Yeah, he
and has
had to. I
yeah.
think he had to. They
Yeah,
played it quite
that's a
nicely.
situation where there's such an obvious choice, but drafters don't always make the obvious choice. So I always think it's interesting to observe where like there's just a clear choice that they should make,
Yeah,
and do they or not.
he's generally going at the start of the 6th round. So when you have Chase, that makes perfect sense to go ahead and do that. He did take Zamir White, where he would have still got a half a round of discount on Joe Burrow. So I probably would have went that route. But
Right.
he still gets him. But if he missed out on Burrow there, that might have been not their best tactical decision. We do see though since that Joe Burrow pick, Jonathan Brooks, Brock Purdy then went, then Tua has gone. So we are 1 pick away. We have had a number of the names that we were discussing, including Jameson Williams. So if he made it 1 more pick, I think he's a clear selection for us here. Jordan
Yeah.
Addison also. And TJ Hawkinson goes. So I think Jameson Williams is the
Yeah.
pick
Just
here.
clear selection here. And
And
then
I mentioned previously, the second pick likely being a running back, but we've been kind of given a situation here where we may get Jordan Addison or Cortland Sutton. And I know we mentioned I'm not crazy high on Sutton himself, but I think on this roster it would make sense him or Addison. Have you
so I
a
have a
name?
question for you here.
Yeah,
So um we've seen quarterbacks sort of fly off the board here, and there is a quarterback in Dak Prescott who is about a round and a half after ADP. We don't have any correlation with him, but is that something you think we could do? where maybe we could take like a Rico Dowdle, and then I know you like Jalen Tolbert, and it never feels good to pass on such a value when when the whole draft is just eating up their position.
Yeah, I probably would push it, and that's because we have nothing with it. And I haven't been a heavy Dak Prescott drafter in general, but at this price, it would make sense. Caleb Williams also got drafted just there. I think I'm looking to see if we can have a fall
There's
in Trevor Lawrence potentially or something to that effect.
none. There's very few of these quarterbacks who are falling. Um, I'm okay to I am okay to do Addison here, um, but
I think we should be aggressive at wide receiver and see what happens first. Now, again, I'm going to
okay,
tell you the bye weeks. Addison is a third week, 6 bye week for the wide receivers, but I think we can deal with that.
okay. There's not a lot of week 6 by weeks. I don't
Yeah.
think. Okay, all right. That
I
that
think
works
we're
for me.
probably I think we're probably at a 3 QB build at this point, and I'm willing to see if we do get some fallers. So outside of us, the only non QB team is Team One. So I would be willing to see, they probably take a quarterback at this turn, and we might see some names slide back through then. And I would kind of be willing to take that risk. I'm happy enough to try and go down and get some of those veteran quarterbacks, but I'm also happy to get into Bo Nix, even a Bryce Young potentially, Drake May, those sort of names later on. So Goff also did go to the drafter who does have Brock Purdy. It's an Amon-Ra St. Brown team. I guess I'm not really trying to get the QBs unless they're after ADP a lot of the time.
Right.
Would you
Uh,
rather, if it was a solo draft, would you rather have taken Prescott at that point? I just don't think you get the profile of a Jordan Addison at wide receiver as we move through the rest of the draft.
yeah. So obviously considerable, very very considerable opportunity cost there of selecting uh, Dak Prescott because we both really like Jordan Addison. We started off the draft on the back foot a little bit at wide receiver. So it was a tough decision. I think a 21 pick slide at QB when they're flying off the board, I think I just do that.
Yeah.
Um, is my thought. But it I saw your side and I was happy to just scoop up Jordan Addison.
Interestingly enough, the drafter who took Joe Burrow took Dak Prescott as well. The draft we did earlier today, we took Tua and Brock Purdy, and it was a very similar situation where we pushed both of them beyond
Right.
ADP in both occasions. So that's again showing a little bit what you can do in those middle slots. That was a drafter who is Jake Ferguson and Jamar Chase, but now paired with Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott. So that's a nice QB room for them. But I think sometimes when we look at these drafts, and if you can push quarterback, you can get completely wiped out. But there's chances when each team has two quarterbacks for those QBs then to start to slide. And again, I'm just kind of willing to try and push it in a room where we really wanted to get those wide receivers. So we're up to 6 wide receivers through 10, and I feel a lot better about that. And also taking that Brian Thomas pick and being able to then get Williams, who we talked about at the Stevenson pick, and then get Addison as well. It makes me feel a lot better overall about our entire wide receiver room. So I think I'm willing to do it for that
Right.
particular situation.
Right. Like
Um,
and that was why I was willing to give up on the value.
yeah, and
Um,
the other kind of wide receivers that I look at later in the draft, even like down to a Jerry Judy, a lot of the time they're going at the front end of the draft board. So kind of picks 1 through 6, and that might be mean a case that then those names don't make it back to us, and we may be much more appreciative of getting 2 wide receivers at that slot, in 4 rounds time
right.
when we get down to that range. So you've added Trevor Lawrence to the queue, somebody I haven't drafted very much, but he has been sliding quite a bit in drafts. He usually goes in the mid-10th. We need him to get all the way back to the end of the 11th. That would pair up with Brian Thomas. We don't have a huge amount of outs in terms of the rest off the roster. I don't really want to be getting into the Gardner Minshew sweepstakes on this particular team. Drake May would fit a little bit with Ramondre Stevenson. That's probably
Yeah,
we're
so
probably looking at
we,
Sam
we, we
Darnold.
really need Trevor Lawrence on this team.
I don't think we really need him. I think that we would like to have the stacking element on the roster. Again, I mentioned this on the other one. I think because of the slightly smaller fields and the 12-team pods to qualify through, I think there's ways that you might be able to do it with not having a huge amount of stacking. And I think what we probably want to do is prioritize Bo Nix maybe and get some of, and I know we did draft Marvin Mims on that other roster, and we were talking about the potential issues with him as Justin Herbert goes off the board. Some of the issues with him, but I do think he can backstack either the Patriots or the Broncos, and that would be beneficial. I also think you could take Justin.
Those would be targets for us, but
you could also do.
You do need a little bit of. I would like just a little bit of stability to kind of cement that together.
When you say stability,
I also don't like going into the last rounds needing 3 to fall your way, because that you can get 1 most of the time, you can get 2 some of the time. Needing to get 3 of them, of the ones you like, can be very difficult.
And I also said that it was Justin Herbert went off the board. I was thinking that it was Trevor Lawrence, so it's Justin Herbert. So we still do have that chance for him to get back through. I agree. You don't want to be completely locked out, and you want things to fall your way. But I also wanted Jordan Addison, so we'll be able to see if that's the right or wrong.
Yeah, I didn't realize we took Jordan Addison. I didn't realize we were still arguing about that.
Oh, is that? I know we weren't arguing about the pick. It was more the quarterback strategy. And obviously now we can set up Sam Darnold, who we would love to have on this roster. I think he's the must-have player, if we're being honest, to go with Jordan Addison.
Is he your must-draft player of the summer?
He very much is not, but he may be on this roster. I am saying that
you pass on quarterback and you have Jordan Addison in your team, Sam Darnold is your must-draft player. You heard it here first.
Yeah, So I don't know if Sam Darnold will get this. We do have a TJ Hawkinson drafter in front of us, but he is well down the list here. Luke Musgrave goes off the board. So there's 4 picks before us. I do think we would I can't say hit the jackpot, but it would be massive if Lawrence snuck back through to us. But there is the other names are all fine, but it's just that they're not going to be stacked out. Like my quarterback usually off the list that will be available here would be Geno Smith, Bo Nix, Derek Carr, Bryce Young, maybe even. Have you been spooked off? I got spooked off a little bit by that Daniel Jones preseason game. I was drafting Daniel Jones quite a bit. You could do some Giants backdoor stuff as well.
Yeah. I think Daniel Jones would be a target for us, with or without Trevor Lawrence. It spooked off. Yeah. You have that emotional reaction, don't you? Whereas you get reminded of just how low the lowlights can be.
Well, that was bad. That was tragic.
But I think we all understood what type of player Daniel Jones is. Where when he's asked to push he said his issue was he was asked to be aggressive with the ball, and that's what happens when you ask Daniel Jones to be aggressive with the ball. So that I don't think that's a surprise for anything. If you draft Daniel Jones, you're hoping that the team is successful in hiding Daniel Jones, and that you get a little bit of rushing touchdowns.
The nerves are here. There's 2 teams in front of us. One's a Tua team, one's a Richardson team. We do have Trevor Lawrence still available. 2 picks to go, and this is the way where we've got caught a good few times on players we like. This would be unfortunate. I think, though, again, if we don't get Lawrence, are you passing on quarterback here? 1 pick to go. Come on, give it to us. Let us have him. We want him. 1 pick.
We really, really need it. We really, really need it. Please.
Going to turn off the recording if we don't get him. Let us have him. Let us have him.
Smash the screen.
Yes.
Oh, thank God.
The red flashed up and we thought our hopes were gone, but it was Kirk Cousins.
Okay.
We should have probably seen that with the Drake London team, but that is a big swing of good fortune to pass up on Lawrence or pass up on Prescott at that point for Addison, but to get Lawrence back through. So Lawrence usually is going as QB 16, 10.09, 10.08 range. We get him at the 11.11. So that worked out very well for us. But now we have to consider.
And we get the last in a tier as well.
Yeah,
We're used to
definitely.
drafting the first in the tier.
The one interesting thing I want to pitch here is we took Puka Nakua. We didn't talk at all about needing Matthew Stafford. Are you out in Stafford?
And I've drafted a little of Stafford. I think he makes sense for this team. And he's definitely somebody who I'm more than happy to push though, because you
Yeah.
see some of the articles about him in the off season, and they sound like he's retired.
Yeah, that's always my concern. I think there's a very close proximity to the end. But he would have fit. He's still there, but I think he's somebody
Yeah.
you want to see if he can fall through.
Right.
Nick
This is a
Chubb
better
did go,
round.
so we can't talk about Nick Chubb, but we do get Zach Charbonnet, we get Jalen Wright, we get J.K. Dobbins, like lots of good running back options. I think we can add our third running back here if that's the way you want to go.
Yeah. I think this is a good spot for Charbonnet. Um, I think it's just Charbonnet here. Like
Yeah, let's do it.
we could do Tyler Algier, but I don't think we need to. And then Sharps obviously opens up. It's not the sexy stack, but he does open up something on Geno Smith.
Exciting times lie ahead. It does open a pathway, though, to another quarterback option. So we get Charbonnet. I know he's one of your favorite guys. That gives us a running back room now of Gibbs, Stevenson, and Charbonnet through 12 rounds, which I think is extremely strong for some of the ways we'd be building it out. And having the two elite tight ends, again, I always reference it. Some people will have different thoughts on what an elite tight end is. I have them too in my category. And then we're looking, with our wide receivers. Now we have Puka, we have Devontae Smith, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, Jameson Williams, Jordan Addison. I think we're in a pretty strong position with how we've been able to manage those 12 rounds. And
Yeah,
I've mentioned this numerous times. That's a challenge in 12 rounds to come out with those picks.
yeah, yeah. So that I think that's where when you talk about the whole draft being important, like we true we're disappointed. True on our seventh pick. I know we were a little disappointed to be taking Brian Thomas when JSN and Odunze often go there. But when you look at the totality of our team, true 12 rounds, we're pretty pleased. We were
Yeah.
because, but the way we put it together, we're happy with it.
Yeah, I won't deny it took. I think it took all our efforts to keep this one on track. But
Right. We needed some good fortune with Jameson and Jordan Addison falling back to us. Some
Yep,
really good fortune with Trevor Lawrence making it to us.
that was
And
yep.
but yeah, and I guess that is the thing about the turn as well. You need a little bit more luck. You're at the mercy of the draft room much more because so many picks go between when you select.
So what I'm doing now is I'm just adding some of the kind of future pick names over the next kind of 2 rounds into the draft queue. I've added Jerry Judy's name. Him along with Jalen Polk in this range are kind of only the two wide receivers that I have a lot of interest in. Is there any other wide receivers that you like in this range? There's a lot of running backs I like, and then like we could see what develops with quarterback. Then when we look at tight end, Cole Kmet. He's just after going. I was going to say he fell 30 draft slots there to get to him at this point. But when we go back through, Mike Gesicki was somebody that you mentioned in the previous draft, and then I said after it that he's one of my highest draft tight ends. I'm just going to add this in just for you to have some fun with it. I've added I've added Greg Dulcich to the queue. We can talk about that when we get down to the tight end conversation.
We're
Forever and
only in
always.
the 12th round. It's a little
Oh, I
early
know.
to talking about Greg Dulcich, isn't it?
I'm going down deep on this board, but when we're looking at some of the names that will be available potentially, in 11 picks, what direction are you looking to go here?
So I agree with your a
So
lot of
Greg
what you've done.
Dulcich is the next pick. Is that what you?
I think Matt Stafford would make sense for us here.
If he gets back, yeah, he
If he
certainly
gets
would.
back, he would make sense for us. I think Jalen Polk would make a lot of sense for us. Um, I would be open to Jerry Judy. I know he's he's got some big fans. I hope he starts enjoying football as much as we enjoy selecting
Drafting
him.
him.
Yeah.
I think he's interesting again now because we've got to the 6 wide receivers. It's not as essential, but he is one of the wide receivers I like to draft through this area of the draft. Matthew Stafford, who we talked about at that last pick, if he would happen to get to us, would at that point be like a round and a half after ADP, which would be nice. Jerry Judy is after getting drafted, so that is all null and void.
That dream is dead.
Yeah. Jono Smith is after getting drafted, but I do think it's interesting here when we look through. I'm just trying to see the one I would have some concerns about would have been the Cooper Kupp drafter. That was a CJ Stroud, Jordan Love team. They did take Jono Smith. So there's obviously, again, anyone can take him, but I think there's a chance that we could see another bit of draft luck potentially at quarterback, and that would be nice. But I think we have a range of options. I know you mentioned some wide receivers and the likes of Polk, but like Braylon Allen, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, and then Mike Gesicki might even be in this range. But I think he's somebody, again, you're trying to push beyond. But I think, again, we have some good running back options here. Ideally, I think at this point, a running back and Matthew Stafford would be very interesting. You mentioned the reports of him in the offseason, but if we were to pick up a Stafford here, does this slot into a 2 QB team at that point? Or how are you building? Are you trying to get 3 quarterbacks on most of these rosters if you're waiting to the point where we waited to the 11th round to get Lawrence?
So I think that's right. I think in a lot of years maybe not, but when you have the kind of upside late that is now available this year, I think you have to be very open to those 3 quarterbacks.
This is the pick I think could be the Stafford pick. It's the last 1 QB team before it would get to us. It's a Kyler Murray roster. So that would be, if he gets past here, I'm pretty confident he gets all the way back to us. Right. That would shape it out. But I am intrigued with, once you get 2 quarterbacks that feel like they're really established starters, I'm not as concerned then about the third option. Again, unless it falls to a spot where it's the perfect pick around after ADP. But if you miss out on the Stafford, then you're starting to probably look into more additional quarterbacks. But again, because we've got up to those, at this point, 6 wide receivers. Yeah, Polk went. He would have been the preferred WR that I would have been looking at. So I'm going to say it, I feel pretty confident we're 1 pick away. I think we're going to get Stafford. Have you any concerns at this point? I have no real concerns if we get him at this price.
And I think he's a great pick at this price. Did we get him?
We got him.
Okay, so Zeke went. Unable to resist the Zeke value. So we just lock in Stafford.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but I was between Zeke and Stafford. They were the 2. That was who I was between.
Yeah.
What about you?
He fell so much that at pick 155, I think he's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm joking about the Zeke pick. I'm always wary. I sometimes make jokes on the podcast, and I don't know if it comes true fully, and I'm wary that people will start to draft Zeke Elliott. The only player I don't joke about is Greg Dulcich. But we get our second quarterback set up pretty comfortably in terms of flexibility moving forward. There'll be 2 picks here at the turn. Will come back to us. I do kind of prefer the running back options available here over the other positions. Unless you wanted to go Gesicki, but I feel like passing up the likes of a Braylon Allen or Bucky Irving here is too much.
Right. I agree. I think if we were gonna go tight end, it would be Noah Fant. Ooh. Oh. Braylon Allen goes. So Bucky Irving, 5 picks before ADP, absolutely fine. I think it is. I think it is just Bucky Irving.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. Disappointing that Allen went, but we were going to take one of them anyway. So Alan has had a real, sharp rise in ADP over the last kind of 2 weeks or so. It was nicer getting him in the 18th round.
Yeah,
So we get
not that I got
Irving.
a lot of that, but
Yeah.
oh well.
With 6 picks to go, I really think we can go any direction in this. So I'm pleased with where we've set up, flexibility wise.
Yeah, Colm, you mentioned that we had we good roster flexibility here. We have 6 wide receivers, and we did get 6 receivers through 10. We did go running back early with Jahmyr Gibbs, and now we've got 4, including Gibbs, Ramondre, Sharps, and Bucky Irving. So that feels like a pretty strong 4. Uh, we can pretty easily stop at 6 and be very confident in the room. We got our 2 early tight ends in Kittle and Bowers. Um, I think we could stop at 3 if we wanted, but I think we'd be happier with 4 if we got to the stronger late round selections. Is there any ways that you would like to go in the last couple rounds?
I think that, with the 6 picks left, I think we're in a really good position because if we don't get any of the QBs that we'd be interested in, we could go 2 QB here. As you mentioned, we have the flexibility at tight end, 3 or 4 either way. So we can have 3 quarterbacks or 2. We can have another tight end or 2 more. You mentioned about going to 6, which would be 2 more running backs and then leaving it there. But, again, I think we're in a situation where a lot of the time it's going to be the best player available through these next couple of rounds is going to allow us to, come to a conclusion as to what this roster is going to be like. Like we talked about, it seems like every second round here we're getting a massive discount on quarterback. We got Trevor Lawrence, then we got Stafford. Geno Smith is top of the queue by ADP at the moment. Maybe he sneaks all the way through, and we have to discuss that. But Tyrone Tracy, we're still 9 picks away, but Tracy, Gesicki, the other quarterbacks that will be available, Bo Nix, I think we have a multitude of quarterbacks. I don't think that's a concern. I think we'd nearly want to push them through to the next round if we were going to take somebody. I still think that Justin Fields is a massive upside swing at QB.
Yeah.
He would be in this range. But we took Leggett in that draft earlier. He would be a wide receiver. Vidal went at that pick. But again, Mike Gesicki, I would be interested in on this roster. And I would be interested in Dulcich if Gesicki went.
You don't need to tell me that you're interested in it.
Yeah, I'm not letting this up. I'm going to get you to draft him in some of these drafts. I don't want you to have no winning teams at the end of the season without Gesicki. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, 5 picks away. I'm feeling pretty good because there's a multitude of options that we will have at this turn. I feel like it's going to be very hard, as Tyrone Tracy goes, as I was about to say, it's going to be very hard for us to go through these 2 picks and not get some players we like. Like, even if it got flat, I think we have a lot of QB options that we could have as a second pick. But Sam Darnold's after getting drafted, so the entire draft is ruined. So yeah, a lot
of players that we have liked to draft go there. We had Tracy go, we had Vidal go. I was about to put the Mario Douglas in the queue just when he went.
I'm interested to talk about it. He's somebody that you mentioned on the last draft. And I know you've been drafting some of the Patriots. What's your kind of preferred options in terms of the kind of order? So Polk's going 2 rounds ahead of him, then he's going. Is there any? What's your thoughts on the Patriots' kind of depth chart at wide receiver?
So, I mean, I think the big thing is that they're all going so cheap that if you get a hit, it's going to help you pretty meaningfully. And then the other piece is, if you watch Drake May play, he is pretty electrifying. So there is this chance where he transforms the offense from unwatchable.
Is number 10, is that a burner account that you're drafting a team on?
I've decided that I'm going to draft 2 teams in the same draft. Yeah. And I'm just going to make the picks that I think will annoy you the most.
I think this is a Gesicki pick, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Gesicki is a good pick here.
Let's
Are,
do
are
that.
you are you worried about his week 12 bye? We have Trevor Lawrence on a week 12 bye as well.
And we have Brian Thomas. Not yet worried. We still have plenty of time to get more week 12s in there. Week 12 is often a challenge. It's often a challenging bye week. Lots of Chris Olave teams and things like that. But no, I'm good at that. The conversation then when we take Gesicki, Leggett could be another player to add in here as a wide receiver who's interesting. Um, there's so many quarterbacks. I think I'm just happy to, unless Leggett goes here, I'm happy to push him back
Are
around
you
through.
are you not taking any of Benson? Not.
I'm not taking a lot. I took a lot of them in Dynasty. I'm not taking a huge amount here at this juncture of the off season. I think again, I feel like when I'm talking about Greg Dulcich, I think there's a lot of the same stuff actually does apply to him. So if you wanted to go that way, if he comes back through, I wouldn't be against that also to get him as a fourth tight end. But then it probably does limit what we're looking to do at tight end the rest of the way.
Right,
I don't
right,
think we
right. I
probably don't
mean,
want to get up to a fifth.
it means we're done.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because
so
I
and then
haven't
you
been drafting a lot of them, and the main reason is he's gone. Two of my most drafted players, my most drafted tight end is Gesicki, and for a long time I've been able to get Gesicki in one round, and then maybe a round later get Dulcich. At one point you could get Dulcich maybe 4 rounds later. So I haven't really been drafting Sinat. There's just a lot of these running backs in this range that I like. There's the way I've just been drafting it hasn't really been fitting in a lot of the time. But I think there's a lot of upside there. But I haven't. Have you drafted much of him overall? The profile
uh,
is good. The concern is that a lot of the offseason there's still talk of where his definitive position is. Is he a H-back or is he a tight end?
so I took him a lot in pre-draft.
I'll say same at that point. Yeah, at pre-draft and then even into the dynasty stuff. But the short-term stuff I haven't had as much.
I think we take a look at here.
I think that's yep perfect.
Um,
And interesting,
and then we'll have two week 11 by weeks to worry about.
I'm never going to live down the bye week conversations. But the
But
interesting thing now,
back to Sanat, there was a period of time where he was going even after he got the day two capital, he was going still later than he should, and then he zoomed back, he zoomed right up, and now he's fallen a bit, where people they're digesting the hey, he might be the third tight end, and they kind of see him as a H back, uh, and I think that is a legitimate concern. I have a decent amount of them, so I wouldn't be pushing for him too highly over Gesicki, for example. But the team that he's on, which is the Commanders, they did just trade away Dotson, so there is this lack of
yeah,
firepower on that team, and he is somebody who could change that.
he
And
definitely could. The
when you
other
watch him
part,
in college, he was clearly the best player on his team. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, I was going to say the profile is very, very interesting. Just that it was kind of that around the draft time, there was reports coming out as to what teams were kind of envisioning they would use him at, and that was just a slight cause for concern. But I probably should have more than him, but it's just he's fallen into that area where I'm leaning in other directions. It's true, kind of no fault of his own.
He doesn't have the same luster as Greg Dulcich.
It's very hard to have that same luster. The part here, we've seen three quarterbacks go off the board: Derek Carr, Geno Smith, Bryce Young, Bo Nix, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, all still potentially available. Drake May, who you mentioned as well. So we may have some interesting quarterback conversations if some of them got back to us in 15 picks time. I think that Geno Smith pick is just a smash. Now, there's no stack or anything with it, and it is a Mahomes and Will Levis pick. But Will Levis and Geno Smith usually are going off the board very, very close in the 14th round. And, he got mid-16th Geno Smith, so he got both of them. If I was saying, I would rather have Geno Smith in the 16th and skip on the Will Levis pick, but obviously they didn't know that was going to work out that way. But you mentioned earlier we weren't seeing quarterback falling. And I think sometimes it's just that case of waiting and seeing, and I think
Right.
eventually they do
Sometimes
start
you
to.
just need to stand in the pocket,
Yeah,
see
yeah,
them go off, and then try and pick off some value, which we still got. You're right.
yeah.
You're
What we
right.
got, yeah,
Um,
and like
where
we could be looking
they
at,
all filled up at quarterback,
yeah, and
then they were letting them fall.
where we would have.
I will go ahead.
I was going to say where we would have taken a QB, we would have to maybe that Brian Thomas pick we would have done it, but we'd have to pass on Stevenson, Williams, and Addison, and I think they're the picks when we look back. That 3 pick stretch is going to really solidify this roster.
Yeah, I think Dak was interesting there, but I was fine doing Addison. The reason that I floated him was so obviously in this draft you've gotten a situation where um people they loaded up early and then they stopped. I've been in a lot of rooms where people will load up early and then just not stop, and you really get punished. Um, but maybe playing like that is just playing too much with fear, and need to be more comfortable letting us fall into what happens.
Yeah, I think I've got more and more comfortable over the last probably 2 seasons and like kind of having a sometimes going like for a zero quarterback approach just to see what sort of a like I call zero, it's a late quarter, but like just really like the same as if we were looking
Right,
at running backs. And you know, when you get to a running back and you're like in round 7 and you've like loaded up wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and you're like, oh, that's a really interesting running back. But then you're like, well, this is the wide receiver that I want to add to the roster, and he's like way better than the running back options. But I need a running back. It's like that kind of thing of like you need the
right,
wide receiver, you know. And it's the same thing of
right,
when sometimes it's like, do you need that quarterback or do you push it down and get those like values so you can build out the construction with the like Jameson Williams and Jordan Addison, and maybe they're the players that take that leap forward this year, and then your team's an absolute juggernaut. So that's the part there. Drake May did go. Daniel Jones went. Jalen Tolbert went. Theo Johnson, Rashad Bateman, all off the board. Dotson obviously is top here by ADP, but that's just what the trade. And that, you know, I wasn't drafting Dotson before that, but it feels like now, you know, the draft capital is going to continue to fall down and down. In the queue, you've Kendry Miller, Roshan Johnson, Bo Nix. With how we've, you know, got Leggett there, I think we're comfortable enough at wide receiver. We can probably pass unless we have to at this particular point. Bo Nix, though, would be interesting if he gets those couple of extra spots. And based on what
yeah,
we have at running back, I probably would go to the third quarterback. I am also a little bit concerned with the drafter who does have Greg Dulcich, all joking aside, does have 3 quarterbacks. So I'm hoping that he may pass on him. So if we sneak him through this next pick, we would have 1 pick to go. And I think we might manage to get him as well at a discount based on where his current ADP was. He's usually going at that last turn where we'd be selecting at the 1501. We'd be getting him here if he was to get through at the 1611. So we would really be, you know, having a lot of success at the QB position.
ooh,
He
they do
went for that
take
drafter.
they
Yeah.
take three quarterbacks. Okay,
That's fair. So I would almost be like leaning into a 2 QB team at this time. Now we are on the clock, so we have Kendra, we have Roshan. They're both, you know, picks by ADP at this point. I'm good with whichever you want to prioritize. The other pick I could prioritize if you wanted would be Tucker Craft potentially as another tight end. Jatavion Sanders is another tight end. But I think I could take either of them if you had a preference of running back here and then take one of the tight ends on the way back potentially.
yeah, I think I like Roshan here.
I have
Um,
much more Roshan overall, but I was drafting Kenry a lot before his coach decided that he didn't exist. But there's a lot of obviously concern, right? But I kind of have enough Kendra at a much more expensive price that I'm kind of taking the Roshan picks in general.
I think we can probably get both if we want. Um,
If you want both, I'm good with that too.
yeah, I think that'd be a nice way to round off the running back room. One, two, three, and so we have 7 receivers now. Um, well, if we take Kendra here, we'd have 6 running backs, and so then 2 true luxury picks at the end of the draft.
Yeah, what I'd be kind of wondering, Kendra is the last real target I have here with the running back list that is available, but you could get Miles Sanders, for example, later on if you wanted, or Garendo, would be options like in the later rounds. Looking at the tight end position, we're kind of looking at this wraparound here where you have like Kraft, May, or Sanders,
So
and there's a possibility that none of
our
them get
turn
back.
mate have taken Greg Dortch and Tyler Boyd here, um, as their wide receivers 6 and 7, um, which does give us a bite at Kendry here. I think he's the right pick.
You don't want to prioritize one of those. I'm okay with it, but you don't want to prioritize one of the tight ends.
Um, who would you want at like a Tucker Craft?
It'd be Kraft, Mayer, or Sanders.
So I don't think we don't want to double up on the Raiders. Um,
That's true too. Let's go. Let's go with Miller if we don't have a strong take on it.
okay.
Kraft would probably have been. I'm saying that I let you. I wanted to make sure you made the pick. Kraft would probably be the pick. I don't see any of them getting back as the trouble, and we probably want to get at least one more tight end. But I'm also good with getting that running back pick in there based on how we've invested at the tight end position. So most of them, Kyler Granson, most of them went in general in the 18th round. Now, if we get one of them back, would be delightful. I mentioned there Kyler Granson went. He is somebody who, as I look at ADP here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Connor, is generally undrafted in this
Yeah.
contest. So
Yeah.
that helps us out by one spot. Dawson Knox, who I wouldn't really have been targeting, but usually goes in the 17th, does go. Yeah, Tucker Craft went there. Dagger. I don't see them getting back, and we'll just have to see what we try and do then. How do you feel about a two tight end build?
Well, we're at a tree tight end here. Um,
You are correct, in fact, and I now see that we have a third tight end, so you can disregard everything that I said. I still would have
um,
liked those tight ends, but yeah, I forgot all about Mike Gesicki somehow. So sorry, Mike.
uh, he's your most drafted tight end, and
He is. I draft him so much that I don't even remember that I've drafted him. It's like an auto pick.
Are you repressing the memory of taking him so that when
Well, it's mainly
when he
because
fails this year?
Greg Dulcich is in front of him. I'm, those kind of memes where it's like, I'm ready to get hurt again. Like, yeah, that's me and Mike. Even though at the start of the offseason, I'm kind of like, no, I've done this too many
I've learned my
times.
lesson.
And then now I'm at this stage where I've, hi, I'm Colm and I draft Mike Gesicki. So that's where we're at.
Would you consider a Gerald Everett at all for a 19th round pick?
I think that he's somebody who you can draft, and I think he's in the player pool.
You think so? But
I think I could
don't
still.
want him.
I think that in the 19th or 20th round, when we see what players are available, he becomes a viable pick. I still expect that Cole Kmet is the tight end one and leads that offense. I can't see any real reason as to what would have happened this offseason that would have changed it that drastically from last year.
Well,
So
they got a new coaching staff, didn't they?
I know they got a new coaching staff. I'm talking about like player ability and player talent.
That's fair.
Like you have a young tight end who is like showing progress basically throughout his time in the NFL, and I think is
So,
a very
you're kind of looking for even though Everett is ahead of him or seemingly ahead of him in the depth chart right now.
I could be completely wrong on this. I could be absolutely and completely wrong. I feel like it's one of those depth charts which will change and will prove that
Right.
Cole Kmet is the tight end one.
So, are you saying that he's not actually ahead, or as the season progresses, that they're like, yeah, let's just play Komet?
I would imagine that at most it's a 1A, 1B.
Yeah, it is a 1A 1B.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think it's like a case that he's ahead and Komet is now toast. or Komet's finished.
Right.
Like we've seen Gerald Everett with the Chargers for the last 2 seasons, and like while it has been like somewhat productive, he's like a 30-year-old tight end who's not had monster impacts throughout his entire career. There's been hope there, and there's been moments, but it's never all fully like come together. You've like a tight end who's 5 years younger who's come in and I think been pretty good overall as a tight end throughout his career. Like if you look at Cole Kmet so far in his career, he has 211 receptions to Everett's 284, and he's like just like he has 15 touchdowns to Everett's 19. I don't see like why you would be going with the older player in this situation. But I think that at this point of drafts, when you're drafting players that I think should not be drafted, he could be drafted. Now, he did get drafted,
Right.
as I wasn't looking at the draft board as I was going kind of through some of the information. He did get drafted 6 picks ago. So I could have stopped talking about him then. But I did have there was a question on one of the episodes where we drafted Cole Kmet and a RotoViz Triflex Dynasty startup. And I had mentioned that I don't have any concern about Cole Kmet going forward. And that's why I wanted to talk about it a little bit more. We can talk about it more if we want in a moment, but we are back on the clock. Mems again.
We're on the clock again. Let's make our pick. This is likely either a running back or a receiver. And we do have Miles Sanders here.
Miles Sanders would be the running back. The other one I would mention, if you wanted to look at tight end, I do think there's also a chance that Daniel Bellinger gets the tight end role in New York with the Giants. But usually here, the click that I make is Sanders. And I'm comfortable with the 3 tight ends that we have, all with varied bye weeks. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, the thing, I know Bellinger is younger, but I don't like when he's immediately supplanted by a rookie, where that is a 1A, 1B situation as well.
Well, I think at the minute that's a 1-2 situation. Like, we're talking about like I think he is clearly second in that depth chart at the moment.
Okay. And if he's already there, then like that's like a debt now.
But I think at this point you're like picking some contingency options. So like Theo Johnson is going in the 17th round in this, but if he was to get injured, then like you're the tight end 1 on the roster. Like that's more like you're playing at that sort of way.
That's why I think that's why I kind of floated Gerald Everett, where I think you've got a better offense there. I think you've got more of a proven NFL receiver.
Oh, I would much rather draft Everett over Bellinger, if we're going to compare those players. But I do think that, like, when we're looking at this range, the likes of a Sanders is somebody I'd much rather draft, and I would much rather have Kraft or Mayer on the roster than all those names that we discussed.
Yeah.
But when you're looking down at this point, I think you're looking at players a bit like if you're playing in the Superflex format who, a backup quarterback who could get more of a role based on, injury situations or something going wrong.
So if you were to look back on this draft on our Kendre Miller pick, you'd have preferred that to be Tucker Kraft?
I think I would, based on having the 4th tight end and having one less of the running backs. But the reason that comes together is if you don't have that Miles Sanders pick, then you're back in a different situation again. You probably take I probably would pitch for Garendo.
That's like a Monday morning quarterback take.
Yeah, it's a hindsight pick. So at that point, obviously I didn't have a strong preference, but the reason that I was kind of thinking was, again, the players that I'm targeting in that last round, it's usually Sanders is the pick I would look to get. But if somebody did take him a little bit earlier, like we were drafting in the previous draft earlier, and Sean Siegel ended up drafting at the 103, and I believe he took Sanders in the 19th round at the 1903, and then like you miss out on that last running back piece that you've skipped over. So it is always a balancing act, but if we could like flick them out now in hindsight, I would probably do that. But I'm also good with the construction that we've come to here, and I think
we did go 7 running backs here, but Ramondre was our running back 2. Then we didn't take another running back until the 12th round.
Yeah.
And these guys could easily hit our flex lineup too.
Yeah, and the other thing, like I mentioned Sanders, like Sanders could be like, we could be 4 weeks into the season and that pick is dust. Sometimes we put like more into these picks at this point of the off season than we should. It could be the same with Kendry. We could be 4 weeks in, and when you have the narrative around like a running back in his situation can't kind of get healthy, can't get involved in the off-season program and so on and so forth. But like we could be 6 weeks into the season and he's like the RB2 trying to push for extra work in that offense. Like if things do change quickly once the season kicks off. So there's a lot that could shake out. And I think having the two of those, you're hoping that maybe you get one good running back part of a season out of it. But I think that we have a lot with the Gibbs, Stevenson, Charbonnet, and then Irvine and Johnson. Those particular picks I'm extremely comfortable in because we were able to get them on the roster and because we were able to. I do think the Jameson and the Jordan Addison picks really helped us at wide receiver. Then we added in Leggett. I just think that it kind of came together well, and we're looking then at one more tight end versus one more running back, and then it would have been a different story because if Knicks had him at two more picks, we'd probably try and take Knicks and Johnson there. So like then we're probably passing anyway on the tight end. So it's kind of one of that. Like you mentioned, Monday morning quarterback. It's in hindsight, but I really enjoy how this roster turned out, and because we went with the two quarterbacks, it did give us kind of those couple of picks at the end, more luxury picks. So what we really need is for Matthew Stafford not to retire during the season.
Yeah, we need him to play a full year. We need his elbow to hold up, his shoulder hold up, and just some good quarterback play from him.
Yeah, but I think there's a fun team, and I'm positive about it. We've got two fun teams out of these two drafts today. Obviously, they've been released at different times, but hopefully people have enjoyed them. We are drafting this in the best ball tournament over at the FFPC, which you can find on their website, myffpc.com. It is $125 to buy in. The top prize is $300,000. Connor has won this contest in the past when myself, Sean Siegel, and Blair Andrews did come second. But either some way, Connor, a combination of the whole crew, we need to win this contest this year again, get into that prize money. But a fun draft, and hopefully people have enjoyed listening into it. You can find Connor over on Twitter at DrecoOut. You can find me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. You can sign up over at RotoViz for a 1-year season pass and save yourself 10% on that sign up with the code RVRadio2024 at checkout. Gets you access to all of the content and tools up on the website. But until we are back, have a good one.